At first glance, it looks like just another familiar K-pop cycle. One group gets dragged, another gets praised, and fandoms argue endlessly over who deserves the backlash. Kiss of Life was publicly dragged, clipped, and cancelled over a single livestream that leaned into hip-hop stereotypes, even after multiple apologies. Meanwhile, groups like CORTIS and Tarzan continue moving freely through the industry, building entire careers around the same visual language without facing comparable consequences. On the surface, fans frame this as a simple double standard about fashion, but that explanation is convenient, shallow, and completely misses what's actually happening beneath the performance. This was never about pants, jumpsuits, or styling choices. The real issue is how hip-hop is being reduced to a caricature within K-pop branding. What CORTIS presents is not influence, respect, or musical dialogue. It is a performance identity built around scowls, aggressive poses, hand gestures, and tough posturing that signals hip-hop to a global audience without engaging with its substance. When fans defend it as genre appreciation, what they're really defending is a high-budget costume that looks convincing enough to avoid scrutiny. The reason this keeps slipping through is simple. K-pop morality is not consistent. It's reactive. A messy livestream is easy outrage. One clip, one headline, one apology, and the internet feels productive. But a group whose entire concept relies on street-coded imagery requires uncomfortable conversations about branding, culture, and profit. That kind of critique demands more than performative anger. It demands accountability, and most fandoms would rather protect an image than question why it exists in the first place. This is where the imbalance begins. A single mistake is punished because it's visible and isolated. A long-term business strategy rooted in stereotypes is normalized because it's familiar, profitable, and defended as just the vibe. And once something becomes the vibe, calling it out is framed as hate. That's how appropriation survives in plain sight. Not through accidents, but through repetition, packaging, and silence. If you want to understand why this pattern keeps repeating, and why certain groups are shielded while others are sacrificed, stay with me. Subscribe, follow the channel, and keep watching because this story goes much deeper than one live stream or one outfit. What makes this situation more uncomfortable is how intentional it all feels once you slow it down. A live stream can be dismissed as ignorance, immaturity, or shock value humor gone wrong. That was the case with Kiss of Life. Even if the intent was framed as joking, the stereotypes were still there, and the backlash was deserved. But a recurring concept is different. When a group repeatedly leans into the same street-coded visuals, gestures, and performance language, that's no longer a mistake. That's planning. That's branding. That's a company deciding that hip-hop aesthetics sell better when stripped down to their most recognizable signals. This is where CORTIS enters a more dangerous space. The imagery isn't accidental, and it isn't fleeting. It's reinforced through choreography, facial expressions, styling, social media content, and performance direction. Scrunched faces, hunched shoulders, constant hands in frame, face coverings, aggressive posing, none of it exists in isolation. Together, it forms a visual shorthand meant to scream hard, street, and don't mess with us to an international audience. It doesn't ask viewers to understand hip-hop. It asks them to recognize it instantly. That's why people say blackness becomes a costume in these moments. Real hip-hop is not a pose. It's rhythm, phrasing, storytelling, community, and history. What keeps getting copied in K-pop is the outer shell, the scowl and stance without the grounding. The result is a performance that feels hollow but familiar enough to pass. And familiarity is powerful. Once fans associate that aesthetic with talent, any critique gets reframed as ignorance or jealousy. Even when gestures spark controversy, they're brushed aside through plausible deniability. A hand sign becomes a heart. A half-raised finger becomes misinterpreted. But intent doesn't disappear just because it's defensible. Gang imagery is tied to real violence, poverty, and over-policed communities. Treating those signals as props isn't edgy experimentation. It's privileged tourism, performed safely on stage while the real-world consequences remain someone else's burden. This is how appropriation survives. Not through blatant mockery, but through comfort. When artists feel free to copy without understanding, it means the culture has been reduced to aesthetics alone. And once aesthetics are all that matter, respect becomes optional. That's the quiet shift happening here, and it's why this conversation refuses to go away. The backlash never lands evenly, and that imbalance isn't accidental. It follows a pattern the K-pop internet has perfected. Kiss of Life became an easy target because their controversy was contained. One moment, one clip, one narrative the algorithm could digest and spread. Add apologies into the mix and suddenly the internet turns accountability into a scoreboard. Did they apologize fast enough? Did they grovel hard enough? Did they look sorry enough on camera? Once that box is checked, everyone moves on feeling morally superior. But when the problem isn't a moment, when it's an entire brand, outrage becomes inconvenient. CORTIS and Tarzan aren't being judged for a single misstep. Their performance identity is built on the same coded signals over and over again. And that's harder to clip. It's harder to summarize in a headline. More importantly, it's harder for fans to admit, because questioning it means questioning why they were drawn to the group in the first place. That's the trick. When appropriation becomes routine, it stops looking like appropriation. It becomes their style, their vibe, their thing. Fans defend it not because it's harmless, but because it's familiar. Once something is normalized, criticism feels like an attack on identity rather than a challenge to a concept. Anyone who calls it out gets labeled as dramatic, sensitive, or a hater who doesn't understand hip-hop. But understanding hip-hop isn't about recognizing the costume. It's about recognizing the difference between influence and imitation. You can wear streetwear without turning aggression into your only personality trait. You can rap without acting like toughness is synonymous with talent. When styling, gestures, and mannerisms all line up into the same stereotype bundle, the reaction isn't forced, it's earned. The deeper issue is that K-pop keeps reaching for hip-hop aesthetics as a shortcut to credibility. It's faster than building musical identity, easier than developing stage command, safer than trusting skill alone. Put a mask on an idol, teach them hard expressions, add street-coded gestures, and suddenly, swagger is assumed. Fans cheer, companies profit, and the cycle repeats. This is why critique feels so threatening, because it exposes how much of what's being sold isn't substance, but signal. And once you see that, it becomes impossible to unsee. This pattern becomes even uglier when you look at who is being asked to carry it. More and more often, these street-coded, hyper-aggressive concepts are being placed on younger idols, sometimes barely out of their teens. That's not rebellion. That's adult executives projecting a marketable fantasy of danger and masculinity onto kids because it sells intensity without requiring maturity. The industry isn't cultivating artistry, it's manufacturing an image that looks powerful on camera and collapses under real performance pressure. When a group identity is built on signals instead of substance, everything revolves around posturing. Middle fingers that are never fully raised, scowls that never turn off, choreography designed to look intimidating rather than musical. The performance becomes loud, busy, and exhausting because there's nothing underneath holding it together. Swagger is expected to compensate for weak breath control, unstable rhythm, and shallow phrasing. But it never does. The moment the stage demands discipline instead of attitude, the cracks show. This is where K-pop's obsession with the outer shell of hip-hop becomes obvious. Real command isn't aggression, it's control. It's knowing when to pull back, when to push forward, and how to sit inside a beat without fighting it. What keeps getting rewarded instead is excess. Do more, look harder, act tougher, hide the lack of grounding behind constant motion and visual noise. Fans mistake that chaos for charisma because they've been trained to equate intensity with talent. And companies know exactly what they're doing. Selling this image is easier than building longevity. It creates instant engagement, instant discourse, and instant loyalty from fans who attach themselves to the bad boy fantasy. Once the fandom forms around that identity, any critique gets dismissed as jealousy or misunderstanding. The artist is defended, the brand is protected, the conversation shuts down. At that point, it's no longer about music at all, it's about maintaining the illusion that these shortcuts are creativity rather than convenience. And the industry keeps choosing convenience, even as the same problems resurface with every new debut. This is why the conversation can't end at individual idols or isolated controversies. What we're watching is a system that keeps rewarding the cheapest version of hip-hop because it's profitable, recognizable, and easy to defend. Every time a group succeeds by selling aggression as personality, the industry learns the wrong lesson. Another debut copies it louder. Another fandom normalizes it harder. And the stereotype gets passed down as if it were the genre itself. If K-pop is going to keep borrowing from hip-hop, then the bare minimum is respect. Not costumes. Not half-deniable gestures, not toughness filters sold as artistry. Respect means understanding the craft, the history, and the responsibility that comes with those aesthetics. Until that happens, this cycle won't stop. It will just keep rebranding itself on new faces. If you're tired of watching the same patterns repeat, stay here. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. This conversation isn't over, and the next chapter of this industry drama is already unfolding.